This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Bathed in the Moonlight by TherestheSnitch, composed by Burning Aurora. He stood there, naked other than the light of the waning gibbous moon, and Remus thought he had never looked more beautiful. His dark hair fell in long, silken tresses that just twisted at his shoulders. His gray eyes shone brightly in the pale light as though incandescent in their own right. And his skin was everything. Remus drug his eyes along the sleek planes of Sirius's body, his skin smooth and unmarred, rolling out before him like a clean slate that simply begged to be kissed, to be licked, to be bitten. Remus longed to memorize every peak and valley, study the lines and angles with his tongue as guide. He was in awe of the man standing in front of him, and though he knew Sirius's mind better than he knew his own, he yearned to learn the secrets his body had to tell. For the space of a heartbeat, he remembered that he, too, was naked and standing in front of Sirius, and he remembered that his own body looked nothing like the statuesque Adonis that stood in front of him, and for that heartbeat, Remus considered feeling shame and covering himself to hide the scars that littered his body as best he could behind his rough and callous hands. The heartbeat passed and Remus looked into those piercing gray eyes and almost staggered under the weight of what he saw there: want, hunger, desire, lust, and all of it directed at Remus. They stood there, taking each other in, neither one daring to move so as not to risk breaking the moment that was growing between them. They knew they stood atop a great precipice, and that to jump was to risk everything. 6 years they had been friends. 6 years since those little boys stood in their dorm room and shook hands. Oh, the things those 6 years contained! Numerous pranks and tricks that earned them a moniker known round the castle. Countless jokes and laughs that still sometimes echoed around the common room. An infinite number of tiny moments that seemed insignificant on their own, and yet added together, created a magnitude of friendship and life. One giant, life-changing secret that, once shared, was a burden halved. One enormous gift that granted the wolf a pack and lessened his burden even more. One near-tragic mistake that almost cost them everything. 1 year of reconciliation and penance and finally absolution. And now they stood on the edge of all of that, ready to risk it all if they could just. Remus didn't know if he moved, or if Sirius moved, or perhaps they both moved together, but it didn't matter now because their lips were pressed together, hungry and wanting, seeking more and taking more. Remus felt Sirius's tongue press along the lines of his lips, and he opened to grant him access. He placed one hand on Sirius's waist and carted one through his hair until he was gripping the locks at the nape of his neck and pulling slightly as Sirius's head fell back and his neck was exposed. Remus trailed kisses along his jaw and down his neck, nipping and sucking slightly, eliciting the most delicious moans out of the other man's throat. Sirius's hands fell low on Remus's hips, his thumb tracing light circles in the dip of his skin. Remus felt his skin ignite under his fingertips, lightning shooting throughout his body and lighting him on fire. He felt a low growl grow in his chest, unsure if it was from him or some remnant of the wolf that had only just nights ago laid claim to Remus's body. He felt Sirius react to that low sound, drawing his body closer and offering more of himself to the rough ministrations of Remus's lips. As Sirius drew his body closer to his own, Remus felt the long, hard length at the crest of the other man's legs press into his thigh, and Remus was filled with want. Remus walked them both toward the bed, a careful negotiation of legs and feet, until the backs of Sirius's knees pressed against the bed and they were both falling onto it, a tangle of limbs and lips and lust. Remus moved on top of Sirius, and pressed their bodies together, and both sighed in some mix of relief and need as their hardness met between them. Their mouths met again, and Remus rutted slowly against Sirius, acclimating his body to the unique pleasure of being lined up like this with this man after he had spent so many nights longing for him. Sirius released a needy moan into Remus's mouth, which he happily captured and replied with increasingly passionate kisses. He thrust, again and again, relishing in the friction of their cocks rocking together, lubricated by the pre-cum that was readily leaking between them. They shifted, and Remus's knees slotted between Sirius's legs, and their bodies moved somehow impossibly closer together. Their kisses deepened, and Remus's hands ran long lines down Sirius's abdomen. Their hands met at Remus's hips, and he brought Sirius's hands over his head, their fingers entwined and clenched together in the sheets above them. The silence was broken by Sirius's sharp intake of breath, and then,
Remus, Rem,
he gasped out. Remus moved his lips down Sirius's jaw and to his ear, where he nipped at his ear lobe.
Remus, I've never done this before.
Remus pulled back slightly, and pushed himself up enough to look Sirius in the eyes. He saw the hesitation there, behind the want and need that overpowered everything else.
What do you mean?
Communal dorm rooms do not hold secrets well, and Remus knew that Sirius was not inexperienced, having been with both men and women before. It killed Remus to hear of these conquests, but he knew that Sirius had done this before.
I've never,
Sirius looked a little bashful, almost shy, and if he hadn't been stalling what was turning out to be a near transcendent experience, Remus might have even found it cute.
I've never been on the receiving end of this.
Oh.
Do you want to stop? Or, we could do something else.
No.
Sirius replied bluntly.
No, I want to, with you. I just,
Remus smiled, and returned to placing kisses on the soft skin under his ear.
We can take this slow,
he whispered in Sirius's ear, and felt the man tremble beneath him.
Yes,
came the near breathless reply. Anything else he might have wanted to say was lost in a series of gasps and moans shared between them. Remus moved slightly away from Sirius, granting himself the room to work. Sirius whined slightly at the loss, and Remus smiled down at him.
I'm going to prep you now.
Sirius nodded his consent, and Remus reached for his wand on the table next to them. He cast the cleaning and lubrication charms, and felt Sirius shudder below him, knowing he felt the warm slickness fill him. He cast the charm again on his fingers, and moved his hand between them until his finger found the puckered hole. Sirius let out a low moan as Remus began running his finger in slow circles around the hole, teasing but not penetrating yet. He waited until Sirius was brimming with want.
We will go slow, but only when you are ready.
Sirius hesitated for only a moment before nodding, and Remus broke through that tight ring. He stilled, only the tip of his finger within the other man, until he grew accustomed to the intrusion. Slowly he slid his finger deeper and deeper, until it was lost inside Sirius. He slowly slid his finger out, and then glided it back in again, and again, and again, until Sirius was moaning with the pleasure of it.
Ready for another one.
He teased the entrance again with his second finger, the tip of the first still inside, and waited for the hesitation to cross Sirius's face and for him to nod again. A second finger slipped inside, and Remus repeated the process of slowly sliding in and out. He moved his fingers more freely, scissoring and spreading them to stretch the other man. He felt his own cock jump slightly in anticipation, already seeking the warm heat that waited buried inside Sirius.
Another one?
Remus asked, third finger already poised to penetrate him. The nod came quicker this time, all hesitation lost to the sensation of fingers and the anticipation of what was still to come. Remus worked slowly still, despite every desire within him wanting this part to be done so that they could just get on with it. This time he moved his other hand to Sirius's hard cock, stroking him gently in time with the thrust of his finger. He moved his finger to find the sensitive spot within the other man and pressed, gripping his other hand at the base to prevent any unintentional release as Sirius arched his back into Remus's hand.
You're ready for me,
Remus said, sliding his fingers slowly in and out again.
You're so beautiful. Let me know when I can continue.
Please,
came the breathy reply that was part consent but mostly plea. Remus smiled, and found himself unable to resist.
Please what?
He lined the spell-slickened head of his cock up to Sirius's prepared hole, and gently teased the sensitive area. Sirius groaned under him.
Please, Remus.
Remus chuckled, not sure where this sudden resolve was coming from.
You're going to have to say it, Sirius, so I know you want it.
Sirius whined something that sounded almost more Padfoot than human, and the wolf within Remus roared in his chest.
Please, Remus, please.
A moment passed, and Remus held his breath and didn't move as he waited.
Please fuck me.
The tight ring opened and slid around Remus until just the bell end was inside, and they both let out matching moans. Remus slid slowly inside Sirius, bit by bit, until he was sheathed completely in the other man. They stayed there for a moment, allowing their bodies to adjust to the new sensation.
Ready?
Remus saw Sirius nod, eyes closed but a look of pure bliss etched on his features. Remus moved slowly at first, giving Sirius time to adjust to the sensations, before increasing the pace and pressure of each thrust.
All right.
Remus struggled to keep his steady motion instead of giving over to the sensations surrounding him, wanting to make sure that Sirius enjoyed this as much as he did.
Remus.
His name came out as part growl, drenched in passion and still more pad-foot than human.
Shut up and fuck me.
Remus dropped all pretense and lost himself within Sirius. He lowered his body on top of Sirius's, and slid his hands down Sirius's arms until their fingers were once again entwined over their heads. He plunged deeply, quickly, filling Sirius again and again, feeling every inch of uncharted territory inside of him. With every thrust, he felt the wolf inside claiming the man, the dog, for his own.
Mine, mine, mine.
Sirius lay beneath him, arching up and pulling Remus closer with his ankles crossed behind his back, and every motion felt like a resounding reply.
Yours, yours, yours.
They moved together, danced together, and became one in the steady rhythm of their bodies. It was not long, or maybe it was hours, for Remus was so lost in this moment that it could have been days passing, before he felt Sirius's breath quicken beneath him, and felt him contract around him. Remus released Sirius's hand and moved his own between them, gripping and stroking Sirius's hard length, coaxing him to the edge until he finally released, spilling over Remus's hand and onto his chest. Remus thrust once, twice, 3 times more until he too found release buried within Sirius. Remus collapsed on top of Sirius, still inside of him and sweat mingling with cum on their chests between them. Sirius dropped his arms from over their heads and wrapped them around Remus's neck. He peppered kisses on Remus's head and cheeks while Remus felt his heart rate and his breathing slow. Remus rolled off of Sirius, feeling himself at last slip out, and reached back to grab his wand. He cast cleaning charms over both of them, and then a cooling charm for good measure, and drew Sirius against his chest, legs and arms entangled. They lay there together, quiet and comfortable in each other's presence. Remus vaguely recalled this moment was supposed to feel awkward, the quiet negotiation of how long was too long to stay entwined this way before shuffling away, but none of that seemed to matter now. There was only quiet contentment. Remus felt himself drifting off into what promised to be a deep and restful sleep when he felt Sirius shift next to him.
Remus.
Remus hummed in response, words lost at the edge of sleep.
You're beautiful, too.
Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora.